Hey Dylan, welcome to the TrainRight podcast.
Hilly Goat, it's good to chat with you. A world apart in some crazy times, but it's good to hear your voice.
I know you actually squeaked out with one of the only performances or like races that happened this year before the coronavirus pandemic kind of, shut down the racing world.
I know. We've been kind of joking about how it felt like I finally caught a break and that something sort of was happened with good timing for me, and it had felt like it had been a long time since that had occurred, and I'm really happy I was able to squeeze in a race before all this madness has sort of unfolded around the world with the coronavirus. But yeah, recognizing that I was very lucky and I'm very grateful that I did have the opportunity to race, because who knows when the next opportunity is going to be.
Yeah. And so this actually is like a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk to you about this year, or in the past few years, I guess. So you just raced Gran Canaria, right? And it was an amazing performance. You got third. That was a really exciting race to watch, actually.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I finished third, as you said. It was a race that I had wanted to go back to since I did it the first time back in 2014. That was really
Yep.
my first international race experience, and I made pretty much every mistake you could possibly make as a pretty inexperienced runner on the scene, and certainly somebody who was not equipped with the tools necessary to be successful in European style racing. And so that 2014 experience was really a humbling one. And, I've always wanted to go back for some redemption, because it ended up being probably one of my worst performances ever. I did luckily finish that year, but it was not a proud finish. It was a pure survival type race. And yeah, going back this year made sense with my calendar. And yeah, I was, really happy to pull off a solid performance again. It'd been a little while for me after a year of hardship and injury, and so to
Yeah.
redeem that first race experience that I had on the island, and yeah, to just feel like I'm getting close to being back in real shape. It was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I know exactly from experience. How much of a race like that can be after a year of injury and hardship. But before we get into that, can you tell me some of these rookie mistakes that you made? Because I got joined the North Face team the year after you did, and I was like dipping my toe in European racing too, but. Holy crap. European racing is a different level. It's like so different from US racing.
Yeah, yeah. So, just to sort of run through a few of the mistakes that I made. So, this is 2014. Like I said, it was the first year of the Ultra Trail World Tour. I had won the Sean O'Brien 50 miler in, I guess, when was that? It was in February of 2014. That was a golden ticket race. Back before the golden ticket races were 100K distances or longer.
Mm.
So that was a really great run for me, a performance I was really proud of. And then it was, I think, just a few days later that I got the invitation from the Ultra Trail World Tour to come to Gran Canaria as a result of my win at Sean O'Brien. Now, those
Mm.
races were only separated by like 3 or 4 weeks. So, after a really hard 50-mile race in Southern California at Sean O'Brien, I'm the type of person that I usually need to have a bit more rest in between. So that was mistake number one. I ran really hard 50 miler and then just sort of like jumped at the opportunity to race in Europe, even though the races were really close together and I didn't have ample time to kind of recover and then sort of train specifically for the demands of Gran Canaria. And then the other, and I think more significant mistake that I made was I, because of some other travel that I had in between the two races, I didn't show up on the island until about 24 hours before the race started.
Oh
And
my God, Dylan,
yeah,
no.
I mean, for people who have been there, it's a pretty serious trip, pretty
Yeah.
hard travel to get to the island of Gran Canaria off the coast of Morocco. And, that really long trip combined with, big jet lag and having basically only 24 hours to get ready for the race. Basically, by the time the gun went off and we were sent off into the night, I was feeling just completely drained and exhausted. And I remember just like going up the first climb that night and just being like, "Oh no, this is going to be a long, long run." And
Oh no.
so those were the two major mistakes that I made. Just sort of like um, feeling like I was, obligated to go do it because I had been invited, even though it didn't really make a lot of sense with my calendar. And number
Yeah.
two, just not really appreciating the travel. So I learned a lot from it. And now, basically since that race, I've retooled how I travel for international races when I arrive to give myself the best possible opportunity to have some energy come race day.
Yeah, I love that. And that's also one thing I admire about you, even pre and post race, definitely, is how hard you chill. It's like another level, Dylan. It's so great.
Yeah, I've been in that mode now for I guess like 2.5 weeks since Gran Canaria, and I'm starting to feel a little bit lazy in quarantine. It's a good time to rest. It's a good time.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it definitely is a good time to rest. But and so were you actually coached at that point? Because I know now you're coached by Jason Koop, correct?
I was coached at the time. Jason and I had
Hmm.
started together probably 5 or 6 months before, and
Hmm.
that run that I mentioned at Sean O'Brien was probably at that point one of my best runs ever. Again, it was a golden ticket race. It was really competitive that year,
Hmm.
and so yes, I was really sort of falling into the whole Jason Coop program, and really like committed to it. And of course, it was all my fault that things didn't turn out well at Gran Canaria just because of the logistical mistakes that I had made. And in fact, I think he may have actually advised me not to make the trip out there, but I just sort of, like, again felt obligated to do it because I'd been invited, and who turns down a trip to the Canary
Yeah.
Islands? So we were working together at that time. It was in the very early stages of our relationship, and now we're, I guess, like 6.5 years into working together. And yeah, Coop is my my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader, and somebody who's helped me more than anybody else in my career.
No. Yeah, I mean, he's such a great guy. I mean, I remember even in one of my races, like he was just a total surprise. He just somehow like showed up on the course and I was like gave him a big hug. I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah,
He draws it out of you, just like, makes you go places you never thought you could.
yeah.
Um but yeah, so I mean, so now I mean, this is what? So 6 years of you racing ultras?
I mean, since then, this is
Yeah.
10 years total of me.
Yeah.
Throws, yep.
So, okay, so I'm going to ask you this question to start. Um, because what makes you, I think like especially over the past few years, like maybe it's been up and down of, you really questioning why you run and why you want to race these extreme distances. What is it about running and running for long periods of time that you love?
Well, I don't know. I mean, as you know, Hillary, I've always been an athlete. We sort of share our a sort of non-traditional upbringing in the sport, and that's always sort of like been what drives me, what motivates me is just like pushing myself, being competitive. I think there's a lot of value in just putting yourself on the line and that's sort of like the nature of sport, of just sort of like testing yourself, putting yourself out there, exposing yourself to challenges. And there's really no better sport for doing that on a deep level than ultra running. And so when I found the sport after my collegiate lacrosse career had come to a close, I was living in Aspen at the time, and so it was naturally a really great place to train. And immediately, just like a lot of people who find the sport, I just sort of fell in love with the daily practice of going out and running in the mountains. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, sort of, I mean, I've never struggled with like finding reasons why, as I said, that's always been my default. The things that really bothered me during my year of injury wasn't like, a lack of motivation to get back to it. In fact, to the contrary, I was so motivated. I so wanted to be running, and my physical body was not allowing me to do so, and it caused just like a lot of like emotional stress too, as you're really familiar with your history of much more severe injuries than I was going through. But it's something I think that people don't, I think, or maybe just discount a little bit of just sort of like when those things are out of balance, when like you so desperately want to be out there and your body won't allow you to, it just is such a hard thing to deal with. And especially when you put a lot of other sort of unnecessary stress on yourself, like feeling like you're letting other people down, like your friends and family and sponsors and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was a tough thing, but yeah, the motivation part has never been a problem for me. It's always been
Yeah.
balancing that with how my body and mind are feeling.
Yeah, and so I mean, I completely agree. For me, it's never been an issue of motivation. Like it's just something I truly love. So it's like something I can't even fight with. It's just like a question of okay, it's like, I'm gonna work towards that goal. It's like it's gonna happen. But it's a little bit different when your body kind of, needs a kind of a forced recovery period. And so I mean, you've had several strong performances. Like so 2019, I mean, well, that wasn't your best year. Like what I mean, we've talked about this
Yeah,
before, but what where did this I mean, where did this start? And like kind of yeah, take me through it cuz I think you yeah, 2019 like dealt you some pretty crappy cards.
yeah. Well, so I'm glad you asked, and I hope I can answer it in a way that won't take an hour. But so going back even a little bit further to 2018, I had a really, really great season that year. I won Tarawera and UTMF. I got second place at TDS. In both.
But let's rewind that a little bit. Like that was amazing. 2018. Like let's take UTMF, so Ultra Trail Mount Fuji, and TDS. Those are my two favorite races to watch.
Right.
Like it was so like you were just like racing all out with Powell for UTMF, and
Mm-hmm.
you passed him in the last what 400 meters, maybe not that short, but
Yeah. So
yeah. And then TDS was like a nail biter. It was a really competitive, like amazing year.
right. Yeah. And so at TDS, that was also one of the closest, I think, long course finishes ever. The podium there after 13 and a half hours of racing was separated by 90 seconds. So we were literally sprinting through the streets of Chamonix, trying to, beat one another. So it was both, those two race experiences were two of the most powerful, amazing days of my life, and they're separated by 4 months. Both were performances I was super, super happy with, super proud of. Tarawera was also a good race for me. Again, winning that race for the second time. I had an awesome day doing an FKT project with Red Bull on the Lost Coast of California. And so 2018 was just a year where everything just clicked. And I really felt like I had like everything figured out. I sort of felt that I could take the strategy that I employed in 2018 and just copy and paste it every year going forward. And I was just like never going to have a bad race ever again. And it was weird because, like, at the end of that year, I'm also renegotiating all my contracts with my sponsors, and like everything's just going really well for me. And for some reason I just sort of like fell into this rut, just fell into this kind of emotional hole where I just like lost track of, where I was. I sort of just
Mm.
totally went the opposite direction where everything seemed to be going great for me. And for some reason, I was just like feeling kind of horrible. And it wasn't long after that that my physical health started falling apart. So,
Mm.
first, like my first race of 2019, the year that you originally asked me about here, where things were not great, was at the Hong Kong 100K. Because the North Face 50 miler had been canceled the year before due to wildfires, I sort of just transitioned my focus and energy to the Hong Kong 100K. I flew out there and, first day upon arriving, just got like ridiculously sick with some sort of traveler's bug. So, that was
Mm.
I ultimately tried to run the race, even though, it was clear that I was, not equipped for a good performance, ended up dropping out after like 25 miles. And then I was going to do a
Yeah.
ski engineering race with our friend and North Face teammate Mike Foote. And again, race week, I got like ridiculously sick. This time with like a upper respiratory thing, like flu type thing, rather than a stomach thing. But I've always had this just amazing immune system, and to start out 2019 by getting like bedridden sick two different times separated by like 6 weeks or something right before competition. I sort of was just chalking it up to bad luck and bad timing, but clearly there was something else kind of going on. And then not long after that, I broke my ankle when I was running, trying to get ready for Transvolcania, and then got back into training too quickly, developed a really bad Achilles tendonitis in the same ankle that I had broken. Then, as soon as I could no longer run because of that injury, I got on my bike, crashed my bike, separated my shoulder, got a concussion. And it wasn't until then that I finally like hit pause and said, okay, man, like there's clearly something else that you need to deal with. Um,
Yeah.
and you need to just stop. So 2019 was definitely a very, very challenging year, but I'm finally feeling like I'm mostly through it, and with some retrospect, with some perspective, can start to see the outlines of the value in the experience. But yeah, I mean, it was a low moment for me, and something all athletes go through, but something that's really hard nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I remember just like all of these things that kept on happening, like time and time again. I was like, oh my gosh, Dylan, you're not catching a break. And I mean, can you tell me? I mean, I have, similar experiences through injury. I mean, I feel of it like an opportunity, like you have an opportunity to learn about, what makes you you, what makes you want to keep going, and what makes you a performance driven, like just goal oriented person. But what are some of the things, I think it's different for each person. What are some of the things that you learned, like from going through all those hardships? It wasn't just all like, hopefully, just hard times and you just wanted it to
Yeah.
be over, but what is it that you actually learned?
So I think first and foremost, it was the fact that I can't wrap all my self worth and my how I feel about myself into my ability to perform well as an athlete. It's sounds
Yeah.
very basic, but like I have been an athlete my whole life. I've been running ultras for 10 years at this point and never really dealt with any injury. Even going back
Yeah.
when I was playing lacrosse, like I never missed a single practice, let alone a game, because I was hurt. And
Yeah.
so I was just not equipped with the tools of like being a mature person when you're dealing with injury and giving your body and mind space to heal. And I think the reason for that was because like my whole identity was wrapped up in it. And it was sort of like,
Yeah.
okay, I sign all these new contracts and with sponsors who I know care about me and who I have long-term relationships with. Um, but when you sign new contracts and then you keep getting hurt and you can't perform, you sort of like have this other feeling of like, oh my god, I don't deserve like what I have. I'm a total fraud.
Mhm.
Like, why are these people supporting me? I can't even finish a race. And so there's a lot of levels to it, right? It's sort of like
Yeah.
not only is your body not allowing you to do what you love, but you also feel like you have lost who you are, and that you're actively like defrauding people you care about by like
Yeah.
not being able to perform. And of course, this is all self-created. It's all nonsense. And my sponsors went out of their way to send me notes of support and things like that, which I really appreciated. But it's all self-created. But that was really the main takeaway for me, is sort of like, okay, dude, like, first of all, this you're creating all this stuff in your head, and number two, like, this can't be the core of who you are as a person, is your ability to like run faster than people in races, right? Like, you have to be cool with your day-to-day life, independent of your identity as an athlete. And so
Yeah.
that was something, it sounds again so fundamental, but as somebody who's been an athlete my whole life and really never dealt with injury, it was a pretty profound thing. So that was really the main thing that I have sort of gotten back to, is like, recognizing that I love doing this because, it is who I am. It is what I love to do. I do love to compete, but that, I like and love running independent of my ability to like have good performances. It's something that I love to do just for the pure practice of it and the joy of it. Um, but
I love that.
yeah, so I would say that was really the major takeaway for me in the last year.
And so did you have any kind of practices that you did? Like for instance, when I was injured, I mean, I like did this silly thing that I actually like I was like I thought it was silly, but I mean, it actually like made a big difference. Like I had this book and it was like my journal that I'd write down like, oh, I'm pissed about this today. Or like, if things like if recovery just seemed too hard, I just was like, I can't do this today. But
Yeah,
I would write down affirmations. And like there was one that I kept on reading to myself and I'd be like, okay, like believe that your best athletic days are ahead of you. And some days I would read it and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this like seems silly that I'm reading this because it doesn't seem true. But like
yeah,
I'd say it to myself anyways, and like by the end of it, then I was just like, I was just getting super excited. I was like, yeah, hell, your best athletic days are ahead of you. Like um was there something like that helped you get through kind of like the hard times?
so first of all, I want to tell you that I have been sort of saying that to myself since our conversation on my podcast, where
Oh,
you sort of like brought that to my attention. I think it's just such a cool thing. And so
oh,
when I was in
that's
Cancun
amazing.
a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh, Hillary, she would say my best athletic days are ahead of me. Like, got to have that belief. And it is something that's so hard to sort of come by, because, again, it just like feels fake, and
Yeah.
my wife is very much into this kind of mind body connection sort of thing. And um, so she would encourage me to do things like that, write down things, and even more so, like, just be careful about like the words that I put out
Yeah.
into the world, and like what my internal dialogue is, right? Because like I was
Mm,
constantly just like, I suck, I'm a fraud, I'll never be back, like it's over for me, sort of thing.
mhm.
And when that's your constant internal dialogue, and sometimes your external dialogue, yeah, like it's hard to make any progress, right? So it took a lot of
Yeah.
convincing for me to um, really do much of that stuff. And I can't say that I was really like writing down affirmations, but I definitely did start to get more careful about the way that I was like talking to myself, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so, this mind body connection thing, I think, is super, super important. And doing things like that are, I think, a huge or underappreciated way to sort of maybe not accelerate your return, but just sort of like take some of the emotional baggage off your shoulders that you're dealing with during these times of injury. And so, yeah, like doing everything I could to sort of, um, yeah, relieve some of that like burden that I was putting on myself, was ultimately what helped me turn the corner. And so for me, I was like, going to therapy and doing my daily meditations and, um, yeah, just like talking to friends and family who had been through similar things,
Hmm.
and really, I think that was the core of what helped me kind of come back or come out of it, because really, like I said, at the end of 2018, before any of these injuries, I really just felt like awful internally, and
Yeah.
looking back, like I'm convinced that that was the core of my physical problem too, like when your internal life is not good, I think your physical body is much more vulnerable to things like getting
Yeah.
sick during race week or breaking your ankle, not being able to recover well. Um, and yeah, like, so that's really been, another major takeaway for me is like, you really have to pay attention to that internal life. And yeah, just sort of like emphasize that as much as you do like your physical fitness.
Oh man, I love that because I mean, I was gonna ask if like, I mean, I know you've only had the one race this year, like since all those injuries, but do you notice a difference, like of kind of practicing that, of having the opportunity to practice the positive mental talk, and do you see that translating into your ability to train and perform in races now?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's something that I knew internally, like before all this stuff went wrong, because like I've always had the understanding that like it's not usually like when I'm training the hardest that I feel the best as an athlete,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's always when like I'm training pretty hard, but that like my life is in balance outside of running, when my day job is going well, when I'm interacting with friends and family a lot, when my home life is going well and in balance. um,
Hmm.
that's when your physical body, I think, is most able to you know have these just like incredible sort of, yeah, just like physical performances. And so that, I think is something that I've always kind of like understood, but it definitely has come into sharper focus now that I have finally been through a little bit of adversity. And I feel so funny, just like, complaining about injuries to you who's been
Oh
through so
no.
much. It is like crazy, like in the grand scheme of
Yeah.
things, like I had a pretty minor ankle break. I mean, it's almost been a year now and it's still like a little bit of a problem. So it's not like it was
Yeah.
minor, but like,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, there's people who have been through so much harder stuff, but still, like, it felt like totally life crushing, to me at the time.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, just sort of like having some perspective and, um, yeah, and focusing on that internal thing, I think is really, really important.
I think so too. And I mean, I think it's kind of like, I feel like runners as a whole, like as a community, what makes it special for ultra runners is like, even if you're not running the same pace, like if you run an ultra and like someone runs like a 100-mile race and they're like, oh yeah, I hit the wall, or like I bonked so hard, it's like people know what you mean, right? It's like this, it's you're like, oh yeah, like I was like hallucinating, or like, yeah, I just like cried on the side of the trail. I mean, it's the same thing for an injury. It's like you're kind of like part of this club almost. It's like it doesn't even matter if you have the same one. It's like I feel like it teaches you so much if you just allow it to. And I mean, I just think it's I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not pleasant when you go through it, but it's actually kind of like a really cool opportunity to learn about yourself and like take those things moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure like for you, it's allowed you to have like such a different impact on people than you would have
Yeah.
if all you had contributed was just like, pictures of you on a podium, And
Yeah.
and
And that's like that's not even why we run, I feel like. I mean, so this is a question because I heard you describe of like the reason why, you want to run and why you're an athlete. Like it's not about, you don't have a problem with motivation, but it's like you have, but like it's just a part of you, right? And
Mhm,
so like as you're kind of getting back into, performing, and obviously that's part of, racing. Like races, they are just certain days you can test yourself, but then also test yourself against other people. um but is that one of your main motivations of like why you wanted to get back after injury? Or was it like you more chasing this kind of like freedom and connection to yourself again?
what do you mean? So like what was my motivation, just to like get back or to like perform well? Is that what the
Yeah.
question is? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just because, like, I mean, I think performances, like you said before, it's like these performances that like they make you feel great as an athlete, and like, you're unstoppable. Like these magical moments of, you said like the best 2 days of your athletic career was,
Mhm.
one was UTMF and then one was TDS. Like, are you chasing those, like those actual
Mhm.
moments, or do you think those can come from something else, like not just a performance?
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing. Like, so yeah, I am chasing those, like I do still want to do that, like on a
Yeah.
deep, deep level. I still want to race. I still want to compete. And I want to do it for as long as I can. And I turned 34 yesterday. I've been running ultras for more than 10 years now. And I still feel the motivation and drive every day to train and get better. And I still want to have like amazing performances on big stages against the best athletes. Yeah, that is still like what I really want to do. And yeah, that was
Mhm.
kind of like part of the whole injury process too, is like, okay, I was 33 last year and I was like, well, like, that's not like terribly old in the grand scheme of being like an endurance athlete, but you definitely start to feel like, okay, I'm not like young anymore, And it gives you sort of like a different urgency of like, okay, like I can't be injured for a year, like I feel like I'm in my prime. I don't want to like give up this time. But
Mhm.
I think, yeah, like the more important thing is to like not let that be the only drive, and to make sure that your motivations are pure to just like get out the door and do your workout because you enjoy it, not because like you want to have great performances. And that was really what was missing for me, is like all my drive was last year was like, oh shit, I am not worthy of the support that I get from my sponsors because I can't race, and I'm, getting older, like, is this the end for me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's what made it so hard. It was because like the competitive part of it was really the only thing I was focused on. So yeah, I think that's been kind of like what I was going back to saying earlier, of just sort of like decoupling my love for running from like my identity as being like a good runner. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, trying to balance those two things is really, I think, the key here. Like, I do still want to compete. I do still want to like have my best athletic days ahead of me. But um, if that's not going to happen, right? Like, I can't be completely miserable. I have to be just totally cool with life as it is. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that that's like a really honest and amazing perspective because yes, of course we want to compete. It's not all just like butterflies and, whatever. When I like, I mean, I love to run, and like I could be, even maybe like people are just like perceive me as like, oh, like this happy go lucky person who just loves to run and like look at bugs and things. But like when I start on the start line, like I want to compete, like,
Mhm.
um, but no, I think that that's a really honest answer, and I think it's also a really healthy perspective. And so I think what I want to end with is, let's talk about this concept of the comeback tour, Dylan. What is this?
So, yeah, the revenge tour is
Revenge tour. Sorry, not the comeback. I'm the
yeah.
one that hates the word the comeback. The revenge tour. What is this revenge over?
So this is a concept that I sort of started to think about at the end of 2019 when I was finally starting to feel the momentum shifting in my life and feeling like I was coming back into kind of feeling like myself again after so long, feeling like lost in the world. And it is a tribute to my experience playing lacrosse in college, because in my freshman year, we were ranked number one. We were undefeated going into the postseason, and right before the national tournament, we were disqualified because two of my teammates were academically ineligible. So
No.
we were disqualified from the national tournament, being the number one ranked team and undefeated throughout the season. And yeah, granted, two of our players were academically ineligible, but we really did feel like we had been robbed, right? And this was
Yeah.
my freshman year. And then the next season, we just had this like anger and swagger about us, like that, where every game we just like brought that just feeling of being robbed, and just had this wild like emotional kind of continuity among the team of like we really were like very committed to one another, felt like we had something to prove. And it was just like it's difficult to describe other than to just say it was a magical season. Like we just,
Mm.
and to give you an idea of sort of our attitude and disposition throughout the year, we wore all black uniforms for all of our home games. And instead of like walking onto the field with like our university flag, we walked onto the field with a pirate flag and like a skull and crossbones, and all of us are in our black uniforms, hooting and hollering, and just like feeling really like we're a team and we have, something to prove. And ultimately we were able to win the national championship, and it was just like an amazing, roller coaster of a season. And especially having been through what we had been through my freshman year, it was just like so freaking cool. And but what we called it the revenge tour. We called it the haters revenge tour. And yeah, and it was successful. And sort of that attitude and that emotion, I think, is something that I kind of want to embody this season, is just sort of like not necessarily like, having that anger, but just sort of like having that drive and that feeling of like I'm not done, like this
Yeah.
is what I want to do. I'm 100% sure that this is what I want to do. And, I'm going to leave no stone unturned in service of those goals. So, yeah. And part of the concept was um, going back to races where I hadn't had my best performances, including Gran Canaria. So part of the revenge tour was like, okay, we're gonna right the ship. We're gonna go back and redeem ourselves at places where we didn't perform well in the past, and yeah, take our revenge. And I know that word might rub some people the wrong way, and I want people to know it's not. Yeah, it's more of an attitude rather than like in anger. It's yeah. Anyway, something that I've been thinking about a lot and want to sort of carry with me this season.
and for seasons to come. I love it, Dylan. And yeah, if you need any, like I'll be your wing woman for, that swagger to the start line.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
like it.
and just to give it a tiny bit more context, at Gran Canaria, um, my coach, who we have mentioned here, Jason Koop, who I have an amazing friendship and relationship with, flew all the way out there to support not only me but Casey Lichtai and maybe one or two other athletes. And I saw him at the first aid station, and he brought a skull and crossbones pirate flag with him. And so at the aid station, he was like holding it up, and um, yeah. So anyway,
Oh my gosh,
it,
that's amazing.
yeah, it was great. And the North Face has made me a backpack with skull and crossbones on it, and so yeah, it's an attitude, that comes from, my history of being a lacrosse player, and something that I want to sort of carry with me this season.
Oh man. All right. Well, then if any of you listeners are out there at these races, let's bring a pirate flag for Dylan. That's so awesome. I love it. But thanks so much for being on here, Dylan, and it's always such a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, thanks so much.
Hilly, thanks so much for the inspiration. You are the best, and it's always fun to chat. And I hope you stay safe and healthy in quarantine.
You too.